Hey guys, what's up? Drastic here back again with another video, and today we're gonna do some basic end games. And so I'm gonna first start off with the mate with the rook and the king, which is one of the most simple mates. So it starts off with white should grab the most amount of space possible to cut this king to the least amount of squares. So see, this cuts the king to the least amount of squares. The king can only go to these two ranks. So let's say the king then tries to attack our rook. We just move our rook to the side so he can't be attacked easily. And he starts moving his king to the side. And an important thing in endgames is that you want to get your king active. So we're going to bring our king in, so because we can't just deliver mate with one rook. So king d2, king there, king here, king there. He's attacking our rook. And we don't want to move our rook back because then the king could get to more squares, right? Because we can't mate him if he can go to a lot of squares. So we just go to the other side, still keeping an eye on this rank. He goes here, we go here, he goes there, and here's the important part that many players mess up. So a lot of players would go here, which is not a very good move, but like you'll still be winning, but then white goes here and then you're just like, are we gonna get a draw? Do we really know what to do? But what you should do is actually get this knight position. So see how the knight moves like two in one direction and one in another? So then we have to get that position with the kings and it being black to move. So if black were to go here, let's say, then we could play here, check, and see he can't go forward because of the king. He goes back, we go here. Again, we get this position between the kings where it's black to move. He goes here, and then we deliver mate. See how the king covers all three squares, and the rook covers the two back rank squares. So here we play this move to get to black to move, and if black wants to show the most resilient defense, he'll go here. We'll chase after him. And then we'll get to this position where he either has to go back, which we grab more space with our rook. If he goes here, we grab more space with our rook. He's confined to only the back rank now. Or he goes there, and we give a check, and see all these three squares are covered by the king. He goes back. And here, if we were to go here, again, we would get that annoying position where we just have to waste a move. But we go here instead, and we chase him. And this, he attacks our rook. We go here. And now he's like, I'm going here, and are you going to chase me again? Well, here's another important part. Here we just have to waste a move. So the correct move is just to move the rook really anywhere, here or here, here, let's say. And if you were to go here, let's say he goes here, then this is mate, see it covers all three squares. And if you were to keep on running, then we eventually get him to the corner, and we mate him. So the idea in this is you just want to grab as much squares as possible to rook, and then bring the king so that in this L position, let's get to it. This L position such like this, and it's white to move. So next we're going to go into a pretty basic endgame, a king and pawn endgame. And so this position is completely winning for white, as you can see this bar on the side. And now I'm going to show you how to do it. So first you want to bring your king into the action, because remember, you can't just win by pushing this pawn. If we just push this pawn, then black's just going to win it. Or if we push this pawn like this, then it's going to be very hard to push the pawn any further. See, he can just go here, and let's say we start pushing the pawn. Oops. Let's say we start pushing the pawn. Then there's just no way to win this. And we'll get a draw. And we don't want to draw here with white. So instead, we lead out with the king. And we get this position called this position where if black were to go to either side, let's say black goes to this side, then we're going to grab space with our king. And now we're cutting off these three squares. And if he goes here, we're going to give a check. He goes back, and we're going to continue doing this. He goes here, we go here. And eventually we'll get to this position, which I'll explain later, is winning. So if he goes to either side, then we're just going to grab space, right? So let's say he goes to this side. As I just said, we grab space, cutting him off. He goes back, and we go forward. And if he were to go here, again, I just said that. This happens. Oops, sorry. I messed that up. We grab space like this, and we get to this position, which is winning. So he goes back, and we grab space. And then here we get to this position. And this position is the position we want to get to no matter what. So we move our king to the side. He goes here. And we'll eventually make a queen. See, he goes here, we go here, and he goes here. And we just want to get to this position because this position is winning for white no matter what. So let's say that Black has the move. See, black has the move in this position. Black would go here. We grab space with our king again, and now we just have to escort the pawn up the board. So the important lesson to know about this position is you want to lead off with your king, and you want to get to a position that if black's king were to go to either side, you can grab space and then continuously grab space like this. And then we'll start pushing our pawn. This position is also known as getting the opposition. So when black, if he were to move his king to either side, we would just grab space. If it was black's turn here, let's say it's black's turn here, then we would play our pawn up, wasting a move so that we can again get the opposition. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about this endgame. You might want to practice those endgames if you're not too familiar, or rewatch this video. So this is a pretty common endgame where if we look at it, material is completely equal. Both players have 4 pawns, but actually here white is completely winning. So we start off with activating our king, and he plays some nonsensical move because his king can't really be activated. And we start pushing our passer. So this is called a pass pawn because there's nothing really preventing it from getting here, except for this king, which is going to have to lead a defense of these pawns, and then we can slowly pick these pawns up with our king and win this endgame. So he tries to go for the pawn, we push the pawn again, and he keeps on trying to go for the pawn because if this pawn becomes a queen, he loses the game. And if he were to make a waiting move like this, and then we go here, and then he would go here, well then we're creating a queen, right? So we're completely winning. So he runs after the pawn, we go here, because this is just a waiting move, because once he goes after the pawn, then we're going to start picking up his pawns, and he goes for it, he goes after the pawn, and then here we bring our king into his pawns, and there's no way for him to defend, so he tries to win these pawns, but he's just too slow, and eventually white wins this game, if we see here, and there's no way that this king can catch up to this pawn at this point. See, we just push the pawn, and we create a queen, and as I went over in the rook mates, this is clearly winning. So the important thing to note about this endgame is that you just want to push this pawn to distract this king, and then once this king moves out of the way, then we're going to bring our king in to take his pawns and eventually win this game. And in this position, it would be completely winning, as we discussed. So now I'm going to talk about just a cool trick. This probably won't come up in many of your games, but if you ever get to a position like this, you might think, oh, it's a draw. Completely equal material. There's no passers. The kings are just going to, let's say, if we were just to march our kings into the game, it's just going to be a draw, right? Or black is going to win, you might think you lost. But actually here, we have this interesting resource, which is g6. Which you might say, isn't there 2 attackers on this pawn? And that's what black thought, and he took it. But here, I challenge you to find the winning move for white to create a passed pawn. So the winning move is actually h6, and at first it looks really stupid, because can't he just take this pawn for free? But then, we push on, and if the king tries to catch us, he's too late. And we create a queen. And what if he were to instead, what if he were to instead take this pawn? Well then this pawn becomes a queen, and it's still completely winning. So this is a good thing to know. In a 3v3, there's a way to create a passed pawn with this move. If he does nothing about it, we create a passed pawn like this. And if he does something about it, like takes this way, then we'll go here. And if he takes, we have a passed pawn. And if he takes this one, then we have a passed pawn too. So that's the end of today's video, guys. Please remember to practice these endgames, such as the endgame with a passed pawn. This is a very simple endgame. You just have to distract them with the passed pawn. The king and pawn endgame, which remember you have to lead with the king, and then you have to get this position called opposition, where if the king moves, you take space. And finally, remember how to mate with a rook. It's the same with the queen, except the king cannot approach the queen. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next chess basics video.